Okay, I want to talk about ego. And the first thing I got to say about that is that you got to love your ego. Okay? You have to. Ego gets a bad rap, man. Okay? So I think a lot of people are against ego and they think that it's bad and it's dangerous, but I don't know if you really know exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about ego. Ego is something that you're born with, it's something that you die with, and it's even something that you have on the other side. You can't run away from your ego, so trying to deny it, or trying to ignore it, or trying to kill it in some way, or bury it, is just completely ridiculous and unhealthy. And let me also remind you, is there anyone on this earth that you know of, anywhere, out of the people you know on YouTube, globally, anything, do you know anyone who has completely detached themselves from their ego? Completely. No, you do not. And that's not the spiritual goal. You're already part of God. That's it. Bonus for you, okay? You are a piece of God. So I'm making this video because I'm inviting you to rethink ego and your relationship with it. You came here with it. You're going to die with it. And where you're going, I do believe you still have it. So wouldn't it be smarter to live happily with your ego? Love your ego. Love yourself. Let's think about that. The legendary daddy. That even sounds like ego, doesn't it? Like legendary daddy. That's not exactly why I chose that name. If you read the book, The Legendary Daddy, you'll know that it has to do with my personal legend. That's where it comes from. The book, The Alchemist, and everyone having their own personal legend. And then my personal legend was to become a dad. But even that can be ego, right? It's about telling you it's my story. This book is about pretty much me, my legend. And actually that reminds me of when people used to say what the hell do you think? The world revolves around you? Yes, it does revolve around me. From where I'm standing, everything is me. Just like from where you're standing, everything is you. That's ego. That's humanity. That's the way we are. That's the way we see the world. I think things get a little confusing with ego as we get older and we start realizing that there are places we want to be, things we want to do, and this sense of self or protecting the self starts frustrating that, or maybe even creating problems. It can cause you to lie. It can cause you to start hurting others before you get hurt yourself. If we haven't learned about this by an older age, then we start having a very unhealthy relationship with it. Think about an adult who's above their ego, smarter about it, that kind of thing. As a daddy, I love watching when these adults have kids. I'm at peace with the world, I'm letting go of my ego, and then you have some crazy little kid who's just bratty and just messing things up, because that's what kids are, really. You know what? They're just like a bundle of freaking ego. All different types, all different shapes, all different sizes, all different types of egos. But when it comes down to it, they are just raw ego. So adults who are trying to bury their ego or just kind of put it aside because it's causing problems in their life, all of a sudden have these kids who are just bundles of egos running around in their home, and they're saying I'm going to try to put a cap on it. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to work. It never will. And that is not just my view. I like to go by what Carl Jung said about it, who was at the forefront of psychology and psychosis. And he explains that the answer is not to kill your ego or to deny it. It's to nurture a healthy ego. Later on in life, they have to learn how to change and how to grow with that ego and how to push it aside a bit. Let it not get in their way. But as young children, you're not trying to kill their ego. You're trying to raise a healthy one. In fact, I can speak about this from experience because I was raised that you are not supposed to have a big ego. That is bad. That is wrong. I was taught by some people that I love very much, some adults that, looking at these people who were in the limelight and who were all about vanity. Oh, they are so wrong and that's bad and they're not perfect. And to me, I was taught that that was pretty much ego. And that was something that I wasn't supposed to be doing. I was also raised Catholic and I went to church all the time, heard the stories all the time, and learned that became my life in a way. And in that story, in the story of Christianity, Catholicism, the hero is Jesus. And when you follow Jesus, you follow your hero and you see what he does. When he gets captured, he doesn't say hey, listen, I'm the baddest, I'm God, I can do this, watch me heal, watch him do that. He denies it all. You end up learning that to be the hero is to sacrifice yourself, to not stand up, to not fight, to not ask for more. So for me as a kid, I automatically learned you're supposed to be like Jesus. You're supposed to sacrifice. You're not supposed to take. You're supposed to just bow down and say, it's okay, you can have. of mine. So I learned this, and this is what I took on as my teachings. I didn't have to. It was my own choice to be like, I want to be good. I want to be better than other people in some ways. So I want to, sacrifice myself and not have too much and not be too greedy, not to be all these things. And if you're raised with an unhealthy ego like I was, you end up realizing that you're raised to be a loser. So I saw a lot of really healthy people around me, and I saw them getting a lot, and I saw that I was receiving nothing. I was not attracting anything. I was pushing away because in somewhere I was taught that was better. And I think what naturally happened to me was that I started resenting people with a healthy ego and started looking at it as vanity. I started doing exactly what I was taught from the adults who raised me. I became an insecure person with a very unhealthy ego. And that is super dangerous. This is super dangerous for men and women, because once you get to that point, you start realizing that there's a certain part of you that understands that you might not survive because of it. The world that we're living in, or at least, mostly in the country that I'm living in, the United States of America, especially it being a capitalist country, it's based on competition. And to be able to compete, you have to offer something. You have to give something of worth. You have to work for something. And when you're having a tough time receiving things or believing in yourself or doing all this stuff, when you just really have a very unhealthy ego and you're very insecure, you start realizing I might have to be working for the people with healthy egos, or the people with completely blown apart egos that are bossing everyone around. And this is where it gets dangerous, because those people who feel like losers later on in life decide, I want to win. I'm sick of this losing. Now I want to win. So what inevitably happens is that people with a weak or unhealthy ego end up trying to project strength. They try to project power or a healthy ego. But underneath it, what's really driving them is insecurity, a shadow of fear. This is when the powerless really try to get a lot more through force. And what happens is you have people with very unhealthy egos wanting to win, and they'll start doing it at all costs. So do you understand the whole love your ego thing? Raise a kid with a healthy ego, teach them to love and understand their ego, become friends with it. Going through a lot of loss made me think about Carl Jung and the teachings, a healthy ego. So what was a healthy ego? Well, a healthy ego is success, money, friends, followers, most of the things that people are looking for nowadays. And is doing it in a healthy way. And from studying and watching people as I went through, a private school and then a private university and then more schooling, I really studied and watched the people around me who had very healthy egos. I watched how they were raised. I watched how they interacted with their families. And I saw that many of these people were like freaking magnets to great things in their life. And it was because they had healthy egos. I also saw how these people were able to put their egos in check as adults, young adults, being able to use their ego to get what they need, get what they want, get what can help others also, but also know and stop when they think like, wait, is my ego getting out of line here? Am I doing this for the self only and not for my community? That's a flippin' healthy ego, when a 20-something can do something like that, and they do exist. And what I grew to learn about ego eventually was that it was my sense of me, individual identity, me. And my sense of me and my individual identity shaped how I saw the world. And I think that it's important to actually listen to your ego and start following and start seeing what it desires. Because ego doesn't always push you into bad areas. In fact, as a storyteller, I know that your ego is what starts your story. Your character has to have a desire. Your character has to have a want. You have to have a want. You have to have a desire. So then why is ego so bad? Why do we get so freaked out about ego? Well, I think what it is that it's not actually ego that people are getting all freaked out about. It's narcissism. It is when ego is completely out of control. And when pretty much you have like an adult who is just me, me, me. And isn't that crazy? Because who does that sound like? A kid, right? Really what it is, it's a very unhealthy ego. It's an ego that did not grow, mature. Narcissism comes up a lot nowadays because of President Trump. He's someone who's in the limelight that people think like, his ego is completely out of control. He doesn't like losing. It's always about winning. He keeps on telling people that, follow me and we'll all be winners and that there's no such thing as losing. But before you even get upset about what I'm saying or get happy about what I'm saying, just stop and think. That is a very unhealthy ego. Are we supposed to be doing that to him? Because I don't want to be like the adults who raised me who said like, yeah, that's what's bad. That's why. Don't ever be like him. Don't ever have ego. You know what? Ego got him things. That's exactly why people follow him. because they want the money, because they want the attraction, because they want the people following them, because they want the people liking them. Not unlike many of the people on YouTube that you're watching right now. How are we that much different? I'll tell you what makes the difference. Healthy and unhealthy ego. I think another example of when ego kind of gets bad or gets out of hand or it ends up being hurtful is not necessarily even when you're just hurting other people, when you start hurting yourself. Because that want, that desire, and that trying to get things, ego can get you that. But when it's time to stop and you can't stop, when it seems to be out of control. A perfect example of this I always like to refer to is Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was a person who was put down at a time when blacks were put down. And from learning from other people with ego, he realized, what if I did that a little bit? Could that get me somewhere? But we also know what happened when he got older and he was in his later 30s. He was no longer in his physical prime, and he decided, I'm still going to fight. I'm still going to box with a person who's 15 years younger than me. That is when people were kind of trying to tell him, that ego thing, you got to take care of it because now it's going to hurt you physically. And the crazy thing is that the solution to these problems, whether you're dealing with it in your teenage years or in your 20s, or if it's in your 60s and 70s, when you're dealing with these problems with ego, there's a pretty easy solution to this. And that is sharing. I'm telling you, man, I'm a daddy. I see that it works. It's raised my kids to have pretty good, healthy egos. Is that I let them use their egos. I let them be able to have it and have their identity and be able to do things and win. And then I also know, hey, we share. You didn't win today? That means you're sharing the spotlight. Someone else is getting it today. And that's okay, because we're all in this together. Sharing is taking you out of yourself. It separates you from your ego. That is truly when you start realizing, okay, the world does revolve around me, but I'm going to share right now. What is it like for you? How can I put myself in your shoes? The ego can get so dangerous, and it's so amazing that something as basic as sharing can change those problems. Sharing food, sharing what's valuable to you, giving of your time, sharing your story to help another, sharing your pain to help another. That basic shift, that shift in sharing, if that can work for a 4-year-old, then I know it can work for a 40-year-old. I guarantee you can do these things, and you will not lose you. You will still have yourself and your heart and your love and your things. So if you're having issues with ego, okay, if this is something that comes up in your life a lot, don't be too hard on yourself, okay? And don't be hard on your ego. Think of your ego as yourself. Love yourself. Love your ego. You can still get close to God and do everything, with still having an ego. You really can. But maybe think about it in a different way. Maybe think about the power versus force scale. It's just like, where does your ego want to lie on that scale? Does it want to be down below on the fear-filled side, where the force side is, where you have to push to get everything you want? Or can you get to the power side? Can you raise your energy up to get to the higher levels where you understand and you share and you have joy and you share this joy and love with the world? Or maybe compare it to, the book Ask and It Is Given, when Abraham Hicks explains that you were born to come into this world with a certain viewpoint and that you were going to be in contrast with other people, and that that's okay. That, your ego is going to find your way to be able to fight for your viewpoint, but then also understand the other, forgive them, thank them for guiding you and helping you to become more definitive on your path. So maybe you can think about it in those different ways that might be able to help. I hope that this channel is a home for people who have very unhealthy egos and are trying to find a way to heal it in some way. And always remember that the greatest stories ever told are usually about heroes that were completely abandoned when they were children, that were left to die, or that almost died. If that's what you think your story is, then always remember that's exactly where the greatest heroes are born from. They are born from that hurt, from trauma. Heal your ego, love your ego, and give your ego peace.